hearing about the labour dispute at the IKEA in Richmond. The reason for having this public hearing is that the global union movement are concerned about what is happening at the IKEA Richmond. There are more than 300 workers that have been locked out for nearly 6 months now, and the global union movement are concerned. They are concerned about the workers, but also the workers' families. The international delegation, fact-finding delegation, who arrived 2 days ago, are the same as the person sitting to my right side. The far right, we have Erin van der Maas, here from the ITF, International Transport Workers Federation in London. And next to me, we have Michael Town. He represents the Global Union and their head office in Lyon in Switzerland. And before we start this public hearing, I would also like to say that before we arrived here, Global Union tried to set up a meeting with the IKEA Canada national office, but unfortunately they declined that meeting with us. At this hearing, we'll be listening to a representative from the labor movement in in BC, and from the religious community, as well as from the workers, and hopefully from some public testifiers. The first person who will testify today is the president of British Columbia Federation of Labour, Mr. Jim Sinclair. You're welcome up to the podium.
Thank you very much. Especially I want to thank those who have traveled so far, Peter, yourself, and Aaron, to come here and to be with us today and to be witness to what's going on in British Columbia. As you said, my name is Jim Sinclair. I'm president of the British Columbia Federation of Labour. We represent approximately 500,000 people who are unionized in British Columbia. I appear today with the full support of all the officers of the Federation. In fact, we just came from a meeting this morning. This dispute is extremely important to us, not only in the context of IKEA and its worldwide operations as a major corporation, but to the labour relations environment in British Columbia. I'm sure you're aware that IKEA is a highly profitable company. It made $4 billion last year. And in fact, the IKEA store where workers are locked out today was the first store built in North America by IKEA. It was its flagship as it entered its second largest market, which was becoming its second largest market, North America. We believe that store, which was recently built, is a significant part of the company's market here in Canada. We saw tough times during 2008 in British Columbia, as I'm sure you witnessed around the world. And during those times, there was pressure on wages to be moved downwards. We saw huge demands for concessions from many companies, and it was a struggle to maintain decent wage increases in British Columbia and, of course, North America. But I want to say, first of all, for the context, that last year in British Columbia, the average take-home pay increased by 4% due to wage increases and reclassifications. So the tide has turned back again in favor of the incomes of ordinary people, but that was to make this lockout so important because they're actually turning the tide backwards at a time when nothing in the market or in their market share would warrant such a decision. Originally, the company asked for a two-tiered wage system. A two-tiered wage system is a simple form of discrimination against new employees, usually young people. It says that those people will never get the same wages as the existing employees. The labor movement has opposed two-tiered wages from its inception because we, of course, believe everybody should be treated the same. In Montreal, where there is another store, they do not have that's unionized, they don't have two-tiered wage systems. In fact, in Quebec, it's illegal to bring the system in. So we saw them brought in two-tiered wages and up to $7 an hour pay cuts and benefit cuts for people there. When that was rejected by the employees, they were locked out. They came back finally with a grid that would alter the salary grid, although not two-tiered, would dramatically change, again, the ability of people to earn a decent living at IKEA. And I know you'll hear more about that later. but this would lower benefits to employees, lower guaranteed hours, and lower wages to all the employers as they moved up the grid and extended the grid far away. I also want to talk about the other response the company had. In British Columbia, as in the jurisdiction of Quebec, we have what we call in the labour movement anti-scab legislation or anti-replacement worker legislation. In my opinion, that legislation has helped to, over the years, shorten labour disputes, keep them peaceful, and ensure a respectful relationship between employers and their employees. We've had that legislation in place since 1992. In essence, it says that in companies like IKEA, who originally started doing this, they were not allowed to bring in outside workers to replace workers they've locked out. Instead, they launched a campaign to, as you will hear later, to intimidate, encourage, force workers to cross their own picket lines and go back to work. They did this in a number of ways, including threatening to lower their wages further if they didn't. And this was a concerted campaign by the company, completely out of the ordinary of normal labor relations in British Columbia. We seldom see companies go down this path in British Columbia. Most companies accept the circumstances and negotiate a collective agreement without going to that extent. In doing so, they open themselves up to the charge that they were anti-union, and that the root cause of this dispute is not that they can't afford to pay the money, is that they want to rid themselves of the union. At one point, the company handed out information for Labour Watch, which is an organization in Canada dedicated to decertifying unions. It was set up by employers to encourage employers to get rid of unions and to help them get rid of the unions at their workplaces. In my opinion, this crosses a very significant line in labor relations here in British Columbia and should be a warning sign not just to British Columbians but to all working people worried about companies like IKEA and how they behave. This company obviously has two images. The first image is, of course, their public image, which is one of caring and sharing, respect for employees. They call them partners, not employees, and of course what they're doing today. This has nothing to do with the bottom line. This has nothing to do with profits. This has nothing to do with an economic model. This has everything to do with busting the union and lowering wages for people at a time when costs have never been higher. In British Columbia, it costs a lot to live. In Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, it costs more. I hope that you will take away the testimony you hear today, the information you gather on your trip, and you will take this dispute not only to the national level, but to the international level. I believe that the people of Sweden would not support this kind of behavior, would not support the kind of behavior that's going on in British Columbia today, and I think with your help, we can make sure that by Christmas, not only is there a rush to IKEA, but it's to be served by employees that have worked there, many of them for 20 or 30 years, who have a fair collective agreement that involve getting wage increases, not decreases. So again, thank you on behalf of the Labour Movement of British Columbia for being here today and for making this journey, and we wish you well with your report.
Thank you very much, Jim. Well, your last remarks that I'm from Sweden. So of course we will take this back to the headquarters of IKEA in Sweden, of course, as well as the report. There were two things that you can stay there, Jim. There were two things I forgot to say initially when we opened the meeting. That probably you noticed that I forgot to introduce my colleague on my left-hand side. She's Lindsay Lister, and she's a labor lawyer in BC, and she has served 8 years as a member of the Human Rights Tribunal between 2002 and 2010. And the second thing I forgot to say was that due to the lack of time we have, the only person that can ask questions to the speaker is from the panel. So I asked the panel if you have any questions to Jim.
Hey, Jim. I'm just wondering about the, for the report, I'm wondering about the local and even provincial political context. Would certain legislative agendas, let's say, would that have an impact on emboldening or encouraging this kind of behavior from companies like IKEA and others?
I think probably we've had one other case when there was this kind of attack on workers with the use of replacement workers, encouraged by a very high-profile person on the Liberal Party. So there is a political context for this, but I don't believe that that's where this is coming from. I believe this is coming from IKEA. And it's not part of a larger plan by the government of British Columbia at this point. I would point out that the Liberal government has maintained the anti-replacement worker legislation for its entire 12 years of office as well, under the guise, to quote them, that this is, why would we cause grief in labor relations? They seem to be going fairly well. So I think, again, this particular activity that's going on in Richmond is a notch above what we've noticed and what we've seen in British Columbia in most labor relations situations.
Hey Jim, could you tell us a bit more about Labour Watch, please, and what its role in this dispute is, and other disputes like it?
Labour Watch is an organization that was set up by employers, and we're not clear which ones because they don't have to declare all those wonderful things. It's an organization dedicated to protecting what they describe as employee rights. And mostly it's the employee rights to leave their union and to attack the union and decertify their union. It comes out regularly with reports that show why unions are bad for working people, why we don't belong in the context of a Canadian society, why we don't make sense. And they have a profile for doing that, and they have historically done that role. It's unusual. I should say in all my time in British Columbia here, and in the labor movement, I've never seen Labour Watch being given out as a piece of resource material to workers who were on a picket line. It's completely provocative at one level, of course, because you're handing out information on how to basically break your union. So yes, that's the organization. And as I say, it's not that well known, but it's certainly known in some quarters. And that's why I found it very surprising that IKEA would be promoting this organization in the middle of a labor dispute with its own employees.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Jim Sinclair. And we call the next testifier, Anita Dawson, local business agent from Teamsters, Local 213.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the panel for attending on behalf of these workers to hear their concerns that have been raised. My name is Anita Dawson. I'm the business representative for Teamsters Local 213. I'm also the bargaining agent for the Local 213 IKEA members. I haven't always been the business agent for this group. I was actually a worker at IKEA for 12 years, and I worked in a number of different departments. And I also worked as I was elected as a shop steward, and I participated in bargaining for 2 sessions before I was hired as a business agent in 2007 for Local 213. During my time at the store, the working relationship with the IKEA management was one that looked for problem solving and solutions, and it was always resolved at an in-store level, and the groups worked together to have a good working relationship with management. To take you through a little bit of the history of the negotiations, which started in January of this year, we were coming out of a 5-year collective agreement, which expired on December 31st, 2012. And as that was a fairly lengthy agreement, both sides naturally had proposals that they wanted to be put forward. Especially since there was a brand new IKEA store that opened at the Richmond location just a few months earlier in April of 2012. The workers' proposals that were taken were naturally looking to see about cleaning a few language items up, but also to see whether or not there is any appetite to get wage increases and to just basically clean up the items that were on the table. The employer, on the other hand, came to the table with a booklet of extreme monetary and non-monetary offers and concessions. This came in the form of a reintroduced two-tier wage system, as well as changes in eligibility for benefits and a reduction in those benefits as well. There were many, many other monetary and non-monetary concessions that the employer was looking for. These tactics were very troubling to the workers. As we moved through that first set of initial proposal exchange, it led to an offer that was voted by the membership on March 17th. It was rejected. We came back to the table, we tried to work a few things out, and there was a subsequent offer that was voted on May 5th, and then another one that was voted through a final offer vote conducted by the Labor Relations Board that was on May 9th. Both of those offers were rejected. The May 5th offer that was rejected was the same one that was voted again on May 9th. That was subsequently rejected. The two-tier system being the primary problem with that offer, which would have seen workers currently who were only with less than 4 years of service would not have gotten to the same wage rate that their co-workers, their fellow co-workers had who had more than 4 years of service. This would have led to them being paid at anywhere from $2 to $7 less an hour, depending on which classification they were in. On May 9th, IKEA gave lockout notice to the union that they were going to lock out on May 13th for a period of 1 hour. The union also gave strike notice at that point. IKEA, when they locked us out, they said they would invite their workers back under the terms of the already rejected offer. That was absolutely not a go for these workers. They've already told the company they rejected the offer. They voiced it through 3 separate votes, yet we are still trying to be forced to take this offer. IKEA also sent letters to their employees telling them that they could cross their own picket line and that IKEA would pay any fines and also represent them should the union take any action against them for crossing the picket line to work. As we know, crossing a picket line is a fundamental rule that you do not cross if you're a union member. You do not cross a picket line. And it's also part of our international constitution through the Brotherhood of Teamsters and also through our local union bylaws. And it sets out consequences for crossing a picket line. And that includes fines and possibly expulsion. As we moved through the summer, there was a mediation session, and that ended in an offer that was presented by the company. And this one did not include a two-tier wage system. The system was set up based on achieving sales goals and productivity measures. It was also based on a 6-year collective agreement. If the sales goals and the productivity measures were achieved, then the workers could conceivably get to the top wage rate that was currently in effect in 4 to 6 years. The current wage progression was 4 years. If the sales goals and productivity measures were not met, it could potentially mean it could take 20 years to get to the top wage rate. The employees in the bargaining unit unanimously rejected that offer because they could not see how that would be fair in the scheme of things. And in the long run, how could you possibly earn an income based on something that was so difficult to predict, such as sales goals and productivity measures? It was controlled by the company, was the underlying feeling for why they did not think this was a good system. There were still outstanding issues to do with benefits and the eligibility, where the company wanted to increase it from 20 hours a week to 24 in order to be eligible for benefits. With a large part-time workforce at IKEA, it was going to make it very difficult to potentially get those benefits that would have covered your family. Lastly, looking at IKEA's track record and in preparation and review of all the matters that have gone on, We looked at IKEA around the world, and that is why we asked for some intervention from a global perspective to come and look and investigate what's going on our local issue. We don't believe it's a local issue, especially after reviewing reports from Turkey where we've seen similar things that we thought, wow, we've experienced that here at Richmond IKEA. I'm going to give you a couple examples, and one of them would be looking at sort of the denial and how the shop stewards were viewed within the workplace. In the initial company offer, the employer tried to say that if you were a shop steward, that it would not be possible to hold a supervisory role. And we argued and said, no, that's not reasonable. We've always been very conscientious of our working relationship and respectful of our roles in the workplace, and understand that we have two different functions, and if we're a supervisor, we're a supervisor. And it never crossed over into our field as a shop steward. But to come to the table and ask that people who have put in their time and their effort and their dedication as a shop steward to now either step down and make the choice of either being a supervisor or a shop steward seemed ultimately unfair. The company reluctantly withdrew that proposal. The other major factor that has been an issue here at Richmond IKEA, which I was quite surprised that in IKEA Turkey seemed to have the same leanings, was the lack of union access to the workplace. In the past, it has not been an issue to go in, walk around, say hello to the members. I'm not having union meetings there. It's strictly hello, walk through, and see how everybody's doing. It just involves regular contact, and there was no other problem for it. And with this new management team, it's been a very difficult and trying process to get union access to the workers. The union notice board, and now the company feels that they need to approve all messages that go onto it. And quite frankly, that board has never been abused. It's only been used for official union business. So it does not stand to reason why now they need to have HR approve all the messages going on to the union notice board. There's also been an increase in the amount of worker discipline, which we have not seen the likes of before, for very petty instances. And obviously, we've been on the picket line now for 6 months, and the discipline that's come through on this picket line has been staggering. And it's for infractions that are either not documented or non-existent, in our opinion. And we'll be fighting every single one of them, because it is not fair, and this is a very peaceful, respectful picket line, and why IKEA feels that they need to discipline their workers instead of coming back to the table is very upsetting. With that, thank you, and for allowing me to testify, and I hope this will help you give an overall perspective of the labor dispute and the relationships with it.
Thank you very much, Anita. I open up the floor of the panel for questions to Anita.
Thanks, Anita. You gave a lot of examples from Turkey, from that context, which is, we would assume is a different context than Canada. But be that as it may, I'm actually wondering what your take would be on what the purpose of locking out employees for a period of 6 months would actually be in the context of Richmond, British Columbia.
The purpose of locking them out is to try and get them to accept the terms of this lesser agreement that they've already rejected. Why it's taking 6 months? They're not in any hurry. They've had some workers right at the beginning cross the picket line, and that's enabled them to continue to operate their business on a reduced scale, I might add, because the store has been closed and operating on reduced hours. Certain departments have been closed and the store has operated on reduced hours. But at the end of the day, they feel that we are going to break down and cross the picket line and accept those terms of that condition that we've already rejected.
Anita, a quick question on like every dispute, this throws up different perspectives. So you get a perspective from IKEA and their management, and you get a perspective from the union and the workers involved. So can you just clarify one point? Because what I've heard a bit about from IKEA management is that your union is making unrealistic demands. So can you clarify what your demands are above and beyond what's included in the existing collective agreement?
On the last offer that we put to the company, we thought it was very reasonable because it would allow the workers to work through a progression. It would give the company some cost savings at the beginning. And if we were working off of a 6-year collective agreement, we felt that it was reasonable to continue on with the same type of wage progression that's worked well for the past. And that was a series of very, very minimal percentage increases to the top wage rate, which was 1.5%, with some lump sum payments so that the wage rate doesn't actually compound. All it does is stay stagnant, and then it allows the business to continue to move on, and the company can calculate what their costs are going to be. As far as the new workers that were coming in, it still allows for the harmony between the workers that are already at the top rate, but it gives them some breathing room as they move through the progression, albeit slightly shorter or longer progression.
Okay, thank you very much, Anita.
Thank
for
you.
the testimony. The next person we will hear from is actually an employee from IKEA, and Mark Caron. The podium is yours.
First off, I'd like to thank you guys just for coming to take a look at our labor situation. It's unfortunate that we are where we are today with IKEA. My name is Mark Caron. I've been with IKEA for 21 years at the Richmond location. And I think it's just important to understand, for me, nothing's been as consistent and stable in my life for 21 years as IKEA. It's the longest thing I've ever done. So for me, it's kind of like family. There's a lot of people I look around this room here today that, I walk the picket line with. I never thought in my career that I'd be on a picket line 6 years ago, being on strike. And I never thought that, again, this time around, we'd be locked out. And I know that it's interesting because we always hear, as Teamsters, we say we're locked out. IKEA says that we're on strike. And I'm here because it's about truth. It's not always about the collective agreement for me at this point, because it's gone so far beyond that. It's about the truth of what's happening. IKEA says we're on strike. We say we're locked out. We were on the sidewalk because IKEA forced us out. Be it for only an hour, it doesn't make sense to me why, after rejecting an offer 3 times, why you would say, hey, in good faith, we're going to negotiate because we respect your right to a union. We respect what you guys are doing here. We've heard that. We've heard that from some of the top leadership of the country, saying that they respect what we're doing and what we're fighting for. We have a current letter that says we want to negotiate. We want this to be settled in a good way. Yet they're still not even here. Unless there's a representative of IKEA in the room, I'd be curious. Because they know that we're here now. They can still come and join this public forum. Yet I don't believe that they're here. And if we're going to talk about world-class leadership, let's talk about why leaders aren't here and sticking up for what we are really here for. And IKEA was here and to create a better everyday life for the many. And we're going to do that by selling a wide range of furniture that the majority can afford to buy. IKEA stands for Ingvar Kamprad Uncharted Goodyard. We all know Ingvar Kamprad's story for those of us who have worked with IKEA. And it's inspiring to me. And I asked the panel and I asked everybody else in the world, what would Ingvar Kamprad do? Because he's got 9 points, his testament to a furniture dealer. He's got the culture and values, which I believe in my interpretation, and I'm also a values trainer for IKEA Richmond. What would Ingvar Kamprad do? If the IKEA spirit's a strong and living reality, how come the many are on the sidewalk, on the picket line? Are we on strike? Are we locked out at this point? I still say we're locked out because we're pushed out by a company who says, in good faith, if you don't want it, there's the door. You can take what you didn't want if you want to come back to work. And I don't think that's negotiating in good faith, in my view. IKEA had a lot of information meetings before this was all happening. They put all of our coworkers through their code of conduct training so we would know how to behave on a picket line. It's not what was said, but it seems to be the consensus on the picket line today. Because there's a lot of fundamental violations in the way IKEA is behaving as well in their own code of conduct, with the harassment of the security on the picket line, with the way that they're behaving. But most importantly, I want people to understand that, when they brought us all together, there were some small group meetings where IKEA management of the store would bring us all together, and they would share what was in the contract, but they'd only show you bits and pieces. What I appreciate about the Teamsters, when they do bring everybody together, they show the whole picture. They're not just showing bits and pieces of it. I remember specifically, and I look around the room today and I see some of the people who were in a meeting one day where we had a couple of our senior managers pitching us the new contract. And at the end of the day, when there's a lot of contradiction, because part of it was we're here to make money, and we're really off the values of what IKEA was talking about. It was all about money and profit and the bottom line. And it wasn't about how anybody felt or what anybody was doing. And at the end of the day, I asked the question, I said, at the end of the day, when we sit this all down, is this contract more or less than what we have today? And they said it's less than what you have today. Where that comes in on the lines of the contract, I don't know. I don't look at the numbers. I just want to find some truth, because if IKEA was invited to this process for the past 2 days, yet they say that we're not, this is my experience of what I've seen for the past 6 months and even previous. Ingvar Kamprad would say, only while sleeping do we make no mistakes. Mistakes are a privilege of the busy, of the active. And it's our responsibility to learn from our mistakes. And if there's one thing I've seen in the past 6 years, and even since the last Swede left the service office, is all of a sudden IKEA makes no mistakes. They're like their own demigods in the furniture world. And they don't listen to people. They won't tell you you're right, or I hear you, or I understand you. They're very quick to tell you that you are wrong, and that what you have to say doesn't matter. I've been told already before that if I don't like it, there's the door, get out. It's not about work-life balance anymore. IKEA was a company where they wanted us to be comfortable. You'll never get rich with IKEA, but you'll be comfortable. We'll take care of you. And that's when I started, and I thought, wow, this company's pretty awesome, and they've got some great values. They've got some things I can really connect to. And then the way that they're behaving today, just in basic leadership, let's take a look at the culture and the values. I'm willing to bet that if you interview all the co-workers, they're not living up to who they say they are. Because the IKEA that I know, based on what they are on paper and what they talk about in philosophy, about finding the different way, about most things being, most things need to be done, it's a glorious future, about taking responsibility. There's a lot of great stuff. The 9 points of IKEA Kamprad and the testimonial for furniture dealer need to be applied to this situation, because it'll solve it, and it'll solve it quickly. But we're not seeing world-class leadership step up to the plate here and say, we hear you, we understand, we're going to find the way. What we're hearing is one thing, and what we're seeing is the opposite of what we're hearing. And I find that hard to swallow these days, because again, truth is truth. And we all know that if the right thing was being done, we'd be working today. But I don't understand how we could admit that we make no mistakes, how they are the linchpins, in my opinion, because we haven't even had anything to vote for and anything to discuss. Yet the IKEA values and the IKEA way even respect the fact that we should have a union, we should have organized labor. It's my personal belief that part of the wage structure of this country and part of the wage structure of North America within reason is based on what IKEA Richmond has achieved. Or else we'd be a high turnover, high volume staff machine just for corporate profit. But I do believe that there was a day where Ingvar Kamprad wasn't about the profit, it was about the people, because it was about the people who created IKEA what it is today. But they're not, if you're not a yes man and you're not kissing the corporate backside, they don't want to hear you. They don't want to listen to truth, they just want to listen to what they have to say, and they want to swallow it. And for me, it's hard to stand back and watch it, to see it on the picket line, to see the behavior, to see how IKEA is not showing up, and then to stand there in their arrogance and to tell us how we are wrong. We're not wrong. We feel the way we feel. We're experiencing the things we experience as a collective. And when our last vote was unanimous of 239 against, that says something. And if IKEA is going to be arrogant enough to not listen and to not hear it and say, oh well, and still let us sit out there, we'll sit out there. Because we've gone too far, we've stood too long for what we believe is right, to let a big, Swedish non-corporate company that's supposed to be about non-profit take over. I just don't believe it's right. And for that reason, I'm here today to speak to each and every one of you. And I really hope you guys find some facts, because sometimes I don't even know what the facts are anymore either. But I know what the truth is, because the truth is in here, and it's what feels right. And if it feels right, do it, move towards it, man. But I'll tell you right now, that big, blue, yellow, $125 million building they just built doesn't feel very good right now. And that's because of what's going on inside. Leadership will solve this. But don't read my lips, watch my feet. Walk your talk, IKEA, is what I'm saying. Step up to the plate, tear down your fences, get rid of security, and get us back to work. Find the way. That's what IKEA is about, always finding the way. Ingvar Kamprad went into a fair one day, rolled into a carpet in the trunk of a car, because he wanted to see what was going on. He was willing to find the way. And now all I see with IKEA is they don't really care. That's what I see. I don't know what to think about it anymore. But I'll stand on that picket line until this thing is done, because I want to see how it gets resolved. And I want to see it resolved in a good way. For the spirit of the people, for when we go back to work, so that we can work and do what we love to do. Because it's not just us. Look at what they're doing to the customer and what they've done to their own brand name. It's not a pleasant thing. Some customers don't care. Some customers care a lot. But they were inviting customers to a store that was closed on Tuesdays, and they weren't very happy. And I don't understand how that's creating a better everyday life for them any. So with that being said, I just challenge IKEA to step up to the plate, because they're not even here. And the people I want to talk to is IKEA. I want to talk to the people who make the decisions at IKEA. Not their paid PR people, not the people who aren't saying anything of value. Step up to the plate and get it done. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mark. It was a very emotional testimony from your side. My colleagues here, Michael and Erin, do you have any questions?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Mark.
No problem.
I think we actually, what you're saying, your truth was echoed on the picket line yesterday when the delegation arrived and we spoke to a lot of your co-workers there. It was actually quite striking. But my question is, was there a moment in time or anything that you can identify that where that shift happened? Because it seems like there was a long history of people quite very, very happy to work in that store in particular, and for a myriad of reasons, and just, I don't know what.
I've seen it change since the last time we were on strike with the last store manager and the way that the store management has shifted. And really, I see it as stemming from the very top of the country. There's a couple of people I think that, their beliefs and the way they do business is part of the process, because it's about the bottom line. And I've seen it over 6 years. I've never seen so much instability in IKEA management for store managers. And I don't want to say incompetence, but it's tough to see such instability at the top, And there's a lot of people who've been here a lot of years who know what to do. I'm willing to bet if you let the people that I see around this room today do their job, to do what they know, and enjoy the process, IKEA will get the results they want all day long. But when you tell everybody that they're wrong and they don't matter and you don't meet them, and that you're just a number. I used to be Mark Caron. I'm now 410527, and I'm worth $483 per worked hour. That's who I am. So I see it. They told me, I had my manager come down to me on the sales floor one day, and there's a lady here, right here, Teresa. We were talking, and she was telling us, you know what? Our manager, and we worked with her for years, and I don't believe she believes what she was saying, but she was told to say it, that, it's not about work-life balance anymore. The schedule is going to be what it is. If you guys don't like it, there's the door. And we kind of chuckled about it and just read our numbers off our name tag. But this is the way the mentality is. I was asked if I do I think I know better than IKEA? No, they're a successful company, but I know if I could do what I know I need to do, this business could make more money. And she said, I agree. So why aren't people allowed to be free and to do within what needs to happen in the growth of any business to make it happen? But we're too, what I would say, title-driven in IKEA. IKEA was never about status before. And when I started there, I wanted status. And when I'm here now, I want no status at all. But I see it happening. It's the American way. It's the infiltration of the American culture and the way Americans do business, how I see it. I call it the Americanization of IKEA. It's just what's happening. They've lost the Swedish values, and it's when the last Swede left service office running this country, it's changed. And that's when I saw it. And I'll tell you, I sat in a room and went a one-on-one with my most direct manager just a few days before we went on strike, and what was said to me, and it was asked to be kept to me, but you know what? Truth is truth, guys. I was asked to be selfish and think only of myself in this vote. And I couldn't do that, because I am about the many. I'm about creating the better everyday life for the many. And I would say, what would Ingvar Kamprad do? Can we get Ingvar Kamprad on the phone and say, Ingvar, what would you do? I don't think he would do this. That answers your question. But that's what I say. This past 6 years and the way it's been going is kind of silly to me.
I've got no question for you, Mark, but I do want to say that what we've heard from you today is basically a lot more passionate and a lot more eloquent than anything we've read or heard from IKEA management about their own values and about what they should be and how they should be as a company.
Well, I thank you for that. I just know that if IKEA would stand up to what they say and who they are, we would be here. We never would have been on strike or locked out or whatever you want to call it. If we were living by it and IKEA was actually true to their words and negotiating in good faith, this would never have happened, because in good faith doesn't lock out 300 plus coworkers. In good faith doesn't put out letters that lie about the facts to their customers. And I'm sure you guys saw the most recent one about how they're willing to do all these things for the customer and the coworker and what their letter is about and how they're willing to get back to the table. I don't see any actions that support their words. And this is the problem that I've seen in the past 6 years since our last strike. What the walk is and what the talk is not synonymous. And the truth is the truth. And let's get down to it, because when you get down to that, you're going to find a resolution pretty quick. But I believe there's something bigger going on here than just what we're seeing. There's a reason why IKEA is doing this. There's a reason why they're spending the money that they're spending on security guards and gates and lost sales and pissing off customers and just everything that they're doing. There's a reason. To me as a leader, for me as just a human being, for me as someone who comes from the heart, why would you do that? You got billions of dollars, man. This isn't about money, unless it's about maybe you don't want us to have the money. Maybe you don't want to share it. Maybe it's about units. I don't know anymore, because IKEA will never be honest. IKEA's not being truthful now. Why do we think you're going to be truthful tomorrow? I don't know, unless something changes. But I believe the thinking has to change, or the people have to change. And I don't believe it's the people in the store that need to change, because we've been here for a long time. And we built part of the backbone of what North America is, because we were the first store. It created the pipeline east to west. It created the profits that built the rest of North America. It's an integral part. We should be celebrated and revered. I think we should be the highest paid co-workers in the country. That's just me, and I don't mean to be arrogant about it, but you know what? There's some people who've been here a long time. They know what to do, and they know what needs to be done. And we need to be able to do it. And we don't need to be blaming a union. This is not about blame. This is about stepping up and taking action, people, and getting the job done. Take care of your people. They'll give you what you want. People don't care how much you know until you know how much you care. They don't know what you want to do. They don't care about that until they know that you care about them. And if they feel you don't care about them, guess what? We don't care about you. That's just the way of the human condition. But if they stepped up and show they care like they do in their values, like they walk the talk, because man, I put a number of these people through some values training, and IKEA is not doing what they say I was going to say they do. So I'm happy to be here today and speak up for them. And I'll challenge any IKEA manager, any IKEA, anyone, anywhere on their values or beliefs in what's happening. But they don't step up. If they don't come to the plate, they won't have a dialogue. They'll send PR people to hide behind the yellow and blue wall. They don't talk to people. They're not coming to us. They just want to play a corporate line. And I think it's time that, if you guys can do something, I'll be honest with you, part of me was skeptical, but I'm happy to see who you guys are and what you bring to the table. And if you can dig up the facts and present the truth in a way that people can hear it and understand it, get the message out, maybe we will be back to work by Christmas. Wouldn't that be a nice gift? Yep. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that passion testimony, and I'm sure all of the national delegation will bring back your message. And will certainly be also in the report back. The next person to speak is also an employee of IKEA, Keith Austin. Podium is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Keith Austin, and I'm a 27-year employee of IKEA. I'm speaking as an ex-shop steward and someone who's going to try and bring a bit of business background to the situation by way of a little bit of explanation as to perhaps why we're here in the situation we are today. Before I do that, I just wanted to acknowledge the Coast Salish, the Musqueam, and other First Nations on whose unceded territory this meeting is taking place. Where the business situation for IKEA started to go problematical in the lower market is that the Richmond store was always highly successful. It had the head office for a long time. It was the beachhead in North America. Sales were always very high. It was a training center for people from other stores for leadership positions. In 2003, IKEA opened a second location in Coquitlam. And when you open another branch of an existing business, you expect to lose some of your sales to the new location. It's called cannibalization. When Coquitlam opened, the cannibalization was 40% of the sales of the Richmond store. The previous record within IKEA was 25%. When you lose 40% of your top line, it's a huge problem for the profitability of your business. And ever since then, with this strategy of concentration of locations, which has been carried out in North America, there's been an issue of store-to-store cannibalization. And when you're losing the top line, you're losing on the bottom line. So you reach a point where it doesn't matter how well you manage your costs, it doesn't matter how well you manage your employees and your compensation costs. Without the top line in volume retail, you're not going to make your projections. The reason the cannibalization is so high is that the Coquitlam store is 23 kilometers from the Richmond store. Internal IKEA studies indicate that the distance between two IKEA stores in North America needs to be 60 kilometers. Otherwise, you get this excessive cannibalization. And for those who have been at the bargaining table since 2003, and those who have worked in the store since 2003, this is where all of these internal measures, where the words productivity and dollars per worked hour became absolute buzzwords, and they became the justification for all of the management actions. So we have a new store in Richmond, 10 years after the Coquitlam store was opened. Coquitlam store cost $125 million. The new Richmond IKEA store budgeted something like $118 million. Unfortunately, Coquitlam was too close, and Richmond moved maybe half a kilometer to the new location. So they made the investment in the local market, somewhere in the region of $250 million, not making any money on it. And this is why we're getting the action we're getting. Those of you who have access to the numbers also know that within the first year of the Richmond store opening, certainly there's a large increase in the sales. Unfortunately for IKEA, most of it, more than 80% of it I suspect, is simply a recannibalization back from Coquitlam, because Coquitlam's cuts are simply shifting over to the Richmond store. So I think there's a lot of pressure on the management within Canada to hit these productivity numbers. They've got the same problem in Toronto. They've got the store in Vaughan that's too close, and we know the numbers out of that store were terrible in the beginning. The problem is you have to concede that you made the strategic error, and you can't solve it by cutting your compensation costs. If you cost out what we would lose if we accepted that offer today, I don't have the ability to do that. But let's say it's a few $100,000 a year that IKEA might save in this location. Against a strategic error of allocation of capital of these stores being too close together and not selling enough, it's nothing. A few $100,000 it's petty change to IKEA internationally, and it doesn't solve the profitability issue for Canada or for the Richmond store. You have to concede that you've made the error, and you have to come up with a strategy to solve it. We haven't heard this is the problem. We haven't heard that there's a long-term plan for the local market to solve these sales issues. You take our sales today, add on 40%. We'd still be talking about productivity, we'd still be talking about costs. It would be a different conversation than what we're having today. So I don't think it's the responsibility of this collective bargaining unit to pay for bad decisions, bad strategic decisions, made at many levels of management higher than us. IKEA's made mistakes, many. The founder talks about it on and on. Yes, it's a lot of money. IKEA needs to concede its error, properly locate the other store in the market, and that will solve the top line. Once you solve the top line, you will solve the bottom line all by itself. So I don't think that we should go in and take this offer because 3 years from now, or 6 years from now, the problem won't be solved. We will have provided a small amount of immediate cost relief, and we will be faced with the exact same response from the employer. There will be more cuts, more complaints, that productivity is not high enough, sales goals aren't being met. So I am concerned about the company taking responsibility for the problems. The collective bargaining agreement, the flexibility they're demanding, the cost cuts they're demanding would be marginal at best in solving the situation that they're facing. It's not the solution. And IKEA can well afford to take care of us, as it always has, while it works out these other issues. IKEA was 17 years in North America before they turned to profit. The company goal on profit, it's right there in the founder's words, it's a good result in the long run. I think we need to see some long-term thinking from this company and some investment in its own people. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Keith. Panel, do you have any questions?
Thanks a lot, Keith. And just, we heard on the line yesterday, on the picket line, about the old store and how the old store was actually, some folks were saying that it might have actually been running better productivity than it should have, given the square footage and all these other factors, right? And some folks attributed that to the workers and the extra lengths to which they would have to go with different warehouses and different locations and all the in-between stuff that now with the new building, that's not really a factor anymore, right? So I'm wondering, you were talking as well about, you know, IKEA's kind of looking at the wrong area in terms of finding a solution. What would your view be on finding a solution? Where should they be looking? And especially given that backstory of the old store.
Well, I think as long as when they looked at locations, they looked at Coquitlam and the Fraser Valley. And basically, at the time, I would have bet that the new store in 2003 would have been located in Langley. So IKEA owns the property. The solution is to build a new store in Langley, sell the Coquitlam location and close it, or build it into a mall. IKEA owns lots of property all around the world with different uses. You have to concede the error and then take action. And what you would have is you would have two stores that today together would get, I would estimate, 30 to 40% overnight increase for the market as a whole. And then both stores would be doing sufficient volume to provide a proper return on the company's investment. The problem right now is the profits they're making aren't justifying the expenditure they've made in this market. But it's their own fault. There's nothing wrong with the profitability of the IKEA concept and IKEA stores, as long as you run them right.
Keith, thank you. Just a quick question. We just heard from Mark about a change in values and philosophy and culture in IKEA. Quite a recent change, by the sounds of things. Would you link that change specifically to the opening of the other store and the economic pressures that's been brought to bear on your situation in Richmond?
With respect to Mark, respectfully, I would say it has been in process in a slow way for longer than that. I think it goes back to when the head office moved to Toronto from the Richmond store, and the original people from Sweden, who were the pioneers of IKEA North America, left the head office. And what happens over time is, in order to fill higher positions in the organization, they'll tend to recruit from other retailers in North America. And so the erosion of the Swedish values was accelerated as they brought in more people from Best Buy and other large retailers. They walk into IKEA and they say, why do you do things this way? When the whole retail industry does things differently. I would say that since 2003, the performance issues financially have brought into sharp focus the acceleration of what Mark has talked about, absolutely. They now have performance measures, productivity measures and all that, where they pound the table and they say, we're going to do things in a different way than we've done them before because you're not performing. Unfortunately, those different ways are what created the original success.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith. Please. And now we're going to call our first international speaker, and we call for Tim Beatty from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, US.
Thank you, Chair. I am the Global Strategies Director for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters based in Washington, D.C. And in that role, I represent our union in the Union Network International. Their logo is here on your screen. UNI's webpage is UNIGLOBALUNION, uniglobalunion.org. And I'm going to refer to some documents that are from a network that UNI created. So UNI is the global federation that unites retail workers around the globe. And then they have a subsection where they've coordinated between unions, particularly that represent workers at IKEA. So the work that this coordinating body, this Global Alliance, has done over the last few years, I'm on that Global Alliance. And so I just want to summarize some of our findings. I think they'll be enlightening for the Commission because I find some coincidences between some of what's going on at the experience of the workers here at the Richmond store and things that are happening in some parts of IKEA around the world. Last time we met our UNI Global Union Alliance was back in May 2013 in Stockholm. And we completed a couple of reports for that meeting. One was a survey of the 40 unions in 16 countries that are part of the coordinating alliance, and surveyed them on a number of issues as far as labor relations between the company and its unions in those 16 different countries. And we began by taking a look at what it is that UNI is committed to as far as labor standards. And they have a high standard that's called I-Way, IKEA Way of Purchasing, I-Way. And it has a number of core principles. And the core principles that have to do with labor relations and are based upon the fundamental principles and rights at work of the International Labor Organization. There's also something in the 1992 Rio Declaration on Sustainable Development that's the basis of their own policies. And the guiding principles of the United Nations Global Compact. So these are all international documents that define labor standards, among other things, and these are all the basis for IKEA's own standards. So IKEA wants to be in compliance with some of the best standards globally around labor relations. And more recently, the company has also signed on to the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. So all of these are standards that the labor movement internationally has been involved with developing. IKEA makes those their own standards, and in general, not only do they say they want to meet these standards, they want to surpass these standards. And that is part of what IKEA states as its own standards in its company and what it wants its management to comply with. And so when we asked our 40 unions in 16 different countries that are part of our network what's going on, what we found was terrific labor relations, very, very strong, high standards, world-class standards in some countries, certainly beginning with the home country of IKEA in Sweden. Also the case with Germany, a neighbor country. And for many years in most of Western Europe as well, good relations. But the reports that we got from the survey indicated that recently the standards in some parts of Europe are diminishing. So in Spain, in Portugal, in some of the other countries in Europe, standards are not as good as they used to be. And there's more frustration being experienced by the unions there. There are a set of countries where we found from the reports that the relationships are really distressing. That there's even a violation of the fundamental right for workers to join a trade union in countries like Russia and in Turkey. Turkey was referred to earlier. Part of the reason that Turkey was referred to earlier is our global alliance has made a point of shining a spotlight on the problems in Turkey, and in dialogue with the company to see if we can get these problems resolved, and that workers in Turkey at IKEA stores can have respect for their fundamental rights to freedom of association, their ability to form a union. So evidence seems to show from our surveys that in its expansion drive, IKEA has failed to implement some of its own standards and commitments, including even violations of international standards that are the basis for its own internal standards, and certainly violation of the sort of Swedish values that we come to know and associate with IKEA. They come for us from not only from being part of the company, but also from our conversations, particularly with our colleagues in the unions in Sweden. So we saw a sort of a tendency that was concerning to us, that it seems like the farther you get away from Sweden, there's a greater frequency in which we find problems with violations of IKEA's own commitments. And this is something that we're really concerned about, that may be something that is affecting what's going on here in Richmond as well. So I mentioned the actual violation of trade union rights in Turkey and Russia. There's also some problems currently in Poland, actual violation of trade union rights. The company simply denying folks the right to form a union, even when a majority of workers in a store want to form a union. There's problems in various countries with occupational health and safety. There's problems with violation of the IWA Code of Conduct I mentioned countries like Spain and Portugal, Italy, France as well. Folks are feeling like what was a set of standards that they understood, and this echoes some of what I just heard from some of the folks that are working in the store in Richmond, that what was standards that they came to appreciate and really gain an affinity with the company are things that are changing in the management these days in the company. And so what we're trying to do in our IKEA Global Union Network of UNI is to come together and get a dialogue going with the company in order to see if we can find a way to create a different standard based upon a better understanding of the issues that the company is facing in different parts of the world and how we can work together at a global level to dialogue. And we will make sure, from our perspective, that the results of your commission report are made available to all of the members of our IKEA Global Alliance and enter into our conversation with the company. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm open for questions for the panel.
And in your understanding, what sort of authority I'm searching for the word now, in terms of IKEA Global, what sort of influence can they bring to bear on a dispute like this?
I mean, our alliance includes unions, for example, Handels in Sweden and Verdi in Germany, that continue to have very good social dialogue, labor relations with the company in their home countries. These are countries that have high density, high volumes of sales for IKEA, and a very good relationship with their local management, particularly the case of the Swedes. Then they have an influence over the global management as well. And there is a belief among many of the members of our alliance that through appropriate social dialogue, if we sit down and actually can get the right facts, that's part of why I think the commission that you're doing is so important. If we can get the right facts and get to a common understanding of what the real issues are, and shed a spotlight on the difference between the standards that the company itself has set with what is actually happening in reality in these locations, then we can begin to build a plan for how to move from where we are to where we need to be to comply with the own internal standards of the company. That's where we want to go, and what we're going to try and do.
Thanks, Tim. I'm wondering if you could potentially provide some other examples of other companies where that approach of social dialogue has been successful at that level.
At the global level, there are a number of companies that premise their labor relations on the idea that having a strong independent union makes management and makes the company better. This seems quite logical to me anyway. I can take, for example, a company like the French company Danone. The French company Danone has unions recognized in all of their facilities. They have an annual meeting where they gather together worker union representatives from all those facilities, have a conversation about what's going on, learn directly from workers in presence of management, but with the workers being able to speak freely about what the situation is. There's a monitoring of the labor relations at a local level. There's a constant dialogue going on at the local, regional, and international level about issues like health and safety, like the rights of women in the workplace, a number of different dialogues that happen in the context of the worker representatives through the union speaking with managers. It's one of a number of examples just to give you an idea. I mean, it doesn't have to be this way, and I don't think it's the vision of the standards of IKEA that they've set for themselves.
Tim, I have another question for you. UNI is working very hard to sign what we call global framework agreement. And to my knowledge, IKEA doesn't have any global framework agreement, but the subsidiary of IKEA, Swedwood, has a global framework agreement. Can you make some comments on that?
Yeah, an international framework agreement is an agreement between a global federation like UNI with a global corporation from the UNI side on behalf of its affiliates, like for example it might be for the IKEA Alliance, in which we set out a set of standards that the company and the union movement at the global level agree to, and then a mechanism to be able to monitor developments along these standards that we set, normally along lines of freedom of association and collective bargaining, things like that. Yes, Swedwood, so the woodworking and furniture manufacturing division of IKEA, does have a global framework agreement with the Building and Woodworkers International, BWI. BWI is the global federation like UNI or like ITF that represents workers in the construction and woodworking unions around the world. And this agreement has to do with labor standards, it has to do with environmental standards, and has been functioning pretty well, is my understanding. Yes, they do. And there'd be a copy of that at bwi.org, at the Building One Workers International's own webpage.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim, for your testimony.
You're welcome.
And now we are actually moving a little bit in the agenda. So the next speaker is Reverend Margaret Marquet. I hope I pronounced your family name correctly.
Just think like Christmas card, then put Mar in front of the marker. As I was thinking about this, I felt that none of us really should need to be here. That the situation between the employees and IKEA should be able to be resolved with the kind of corporate leadership by IKEA that would put it in the front of being an ethical employer. So really, none of us should need to be here. IKEA has had the opportunity at this time to show itself as a leader in addressing real issues of the union representing the employees in regards to wages and benefits and working conditions. Yet here we are. IKEA has missed an opportunity as a corporate leader. So we are gathered together to call upon IKEA to take the high road and address the real issues brought forward by the union on behalf of the employees. These are wages and benefits and working conditions that allow for the well-being of the employee and in turn for their families. All of us are connected. The well-being of each employee in earning a wage and benefits acknowledged by the membership in their vote brings something of value to the larger community. When they have what they need, we too as a community benefit. The larger community benefits as the employee, the union, and IKEA have the kind of contract that acknowledges the value of the work of the employees. What happens to one part of our community happens to all of us. And we are deeply linked. We are deeply linked as the arm is to the shoulder, is to the hand, is to the body. And we all need one another. The situation for the employees at IKEA is a breaking apart for all of us. It is destructive for the individual employees, as we've heard today, involved. It's destructive for the union, but it is also a breaking apart of what is good and just and value for the whole. We need to name together, as we've heard from others, what it is that we value as a society. What are the values we want to live by? And our values are shown in how we act. We can speak all we want, but our values are really shown in our action. IKEA Corporation and IKEA Management, Richmond, have the opportunity now to create a new beginning. They can be known by separating employee from employee, decreasing wages and health plans. This is the value that is being shown at this time. Or they can choose a new value and act on it. The value of leadership in bringing employees together, working with the union, and practicing a style of a corporation that contributes to the well-being of the employees and makes IKEA stand out as an ethical employer. So they can choose. They can choose a new value, and they can act upon it, and they can become known. In their founding, as it has been spoken of today, they can be known as an ethical employer and an ethical corporation. Thank you.
Margaret, Reverend Margaret. First, we have to ask the panelists to have some questions.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about your role in the Richmond community or the Vancouver community and what it is that got you involved in or engaged with this particular dispute?
I'm involved in a broad-based organization that brings together labor and religious communities, community organizations, educational, small business, and it's just an understanding that as we work together, that it's a contribution to the whole. And this is a very specific issue that needs a just outcome. I'm also quite involved in areas of reconciliation and of restorative justice, and as the previous speaker has spoken about, we need ways in which there can be dialogue and just solutions coming forward.
Okay, just a quick question. I'm just thinking ahead to the future, when there is a resolve to this dispute. Is there anything you could share with the IKEA workers here about sort of mending those fences? I mean, in any sort of dispute, you have opposing sides and a lot of tension and difficulty. So I'm just thinking, like, how can people overcome that when we eventually do all have to work together? So.
Well, of course, listening, being willing to listen, being willing to find a way to what brings us together in the common good. And certainly from the Christian tradition, we're taught to love our enemy and to find ways to overcome those differences. And I think when there's been a just solution, when there's finally been a coming together, that already you have a beginning. And then we have to work at the interpersonal relationships.
Thank you very much, Morgan, for taking your time. The next speaker is Michael McCarthy Flynn. He's the coordinator for Living Wage Group in Washington, BC.
Actually, I'm here. I'm coordinating here. I'm not based in Washington. My name, as you said, that's okay. That's okay. I haven't met you either. My name is Michael McCarthy Flynn. I'm the Living Wage for Families campaign organiser. I would like to thank the organiser of this commission and the participants in the commission for making this happen. I think it's a very important process that we're going through here today. I've been asked to put some context on the labour dispute in terms of what our wages buy in Vancouver, because wages aren't an end in themselves, they're a mean to an end, and understanding the relationship between the wages in the collective agreement or the past collective agreement and what they can actually buy in Vancouver, I think is very important. What our campaign about is looking at what we consider is a living wage for Metro Vancouver. And the concept of the living wage is a very simple and basic concept. It's what the wage is for a family to be able to cover their basic living expenses. This concept is quite old. It goes back to Christian theology, and it's been taken up really in the 90s in the US because of the rise of working poor, and it's been taken up in Canada because we've had a similar rise in working poor. So there's been a need not just to presume that somebody has a job, that they will be not living in poverty. That presumption is a presumption. In fact, there's a significant amount of people who are working who are living in poverty. So the goal behind the Living Wage campaign is to calculate scientifically what a worker needs to earn to be able to meet their basic expenses, and that's what we've done. For Metro Vancouver, we calculate that a living wage is $19.62. That's taken into account the most common family unit within BC, which is 2 parents working full-time with 2 children. It's based on the expenses, a basket of expenses that each family would need to cover their basic expenses. It covers items like transportation, it covers items like food, clothing, it covers items like household expenses. And the data sources we've used to calculate these household expenses are all accepted data sources, mostly from Statistics Canada or the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, but also from organisations like the Dietitians of Canada, who bring out what it costs to be able to afford a healthy diet every year. Our methodology has been accepted and looked at. It's now used in 31 cities in Canada to calculate what a living wage is. From my brief conversations with the union, the Teamsters involved, I would estimate that up to 70% of IKEA workers at the moment don't earn a living wage. What this means is very simple. From our research with workers earning less than a living wage, it has significant impacts on their health, it has significant impacts on their relationships, and if they have children, it has significant impacts on their children. In terms, often, when people don't make ends meet by the one job they have to take a second or even third job. I won't go into all the statistical details about the impacts. People can go to our website and see them there. I think I'll finish with a quote. Not many people know that when Martin Luther King Jr. was shot, he was campaigning on a living wage campaign rather than a civil rights campaign. And a month or so before he was shot, he said, "Do you know that most of the poor people in our country are working every day? They are making wages so low that they cannot begin to function in the mainstream of economic life of our nation. These are the facts that must be seen, and it is criminal to have people working on a full-time basis in a full-time job getting part-time income." I think it's important to remember within this labour dispute that what is happening is a retrograde measure, and the idea of workers earning a living wage isn't even on the table. So I think that should be taken into consideration in your deliberations. Thank you.
Questions from the panel?
Well, more observation really. It's great that community organising is up and well in Vancouver. When Labour meets the community properly, it brings home what the impact is. It demonstrates it much more clearly. I've had some experience of this in London with London Citizens. I've worked with them. They were a broad-based organising community organisation, and their key issue was the London living wage. It's made a massive difference in London to people's lives, getting a living wage. You cannot explain what it means to thousands of people who suddenly shift up a wage scale, what their kids can now do, what opportunities are open for them, so on and so forth. So I understand the arguments you made, and I accept them completely.
Okay, and we have taken a lot of guidance from what's happening in London. We've been very lucky to have one of the senior organisers who was involved there, Deborah Littman, over here in Vancouver with MBA, who's been giving us a lot of good advice.
Thanks, Michael. I'm just wondering as well about the connection between a living wage and unions and collective bargaining. Could you elaborate a little bit more about that connection?
What our campaign tries to do is to move beyond the collective bargaining approach. Often, and this isn't the case in IKEA, often the case, low-wage workers are in service industries that are contracted out, and the collective bargaining process doesn't really give them the opportunity to negotiate for a living wage. What we more target is the holder of that contract, who we may have leverage over, whether that's a public sector institution or a corporate entity who has worries about their brand or being associated with poverty wages. So that's more our strategy, rather than trying to bring it up, is changing the context where this is brought up and including community partners in this, demonstrating the impact that this has in the community, rather than a traditional collective bargaining approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty, for taking your time to come here to this public hearing. The next person up to speak is one of the IKEA employees, Julia Busek. The podium is yours.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for the commission for coming here, and thank you for having this organized. My name is Julia Puchek, and I am one of the more junior employees at IKEA Richmond. My 3rd year anniversary is actually tomorrow. Yeah, I know, I looked at my name tag. Sorry, I'm just out of breath. I would have never thought that the world's largest furniture chain would play such a large role in my life, both in a positive and a negative way. I've only hit my 3rd-year anniversary with IKEA this week. I suppose I'm really thankful for having an opportunity to show my perspective up here. I'm only a part-time coworker. I think it's important to have everyone's perspective shown with how the labor dispute has affected each of us. Growing up, IKEA has always been a huge part of my life. My parents immigrated to Canada. Of course, like many newcomers to Canada, they come to IKEA and set up their entire home with IKEA furniture. Growing up, I have been exposed to IKEA, specifically Richmond IKEA. I actually have fond memories as a child at Richmond IKEA. I would get really excited about getting a catalog in the mail. I would get really excited about family trips to IKEA, decorating my room, and even as a teenager and as a broke student right now, having a sense of independence in decorating my place. So with IKEA in terms of my career, I still have a lot of family in Poland, and in Poland, IKEA is extremely popular, as is with the rest of Europe. So my cousin landed a job at IKEA a few years ago in Poland with communications and interior design, and he also worked at a factory in Warsaw. He landed a job because his best friend's stepdad was actually one of the heads of IKEA Poland. So he would always boast about how fantastic it is working for IKEA Poland, even though it does have its problems now, as I've been told. And since my love for IKEA, ever since I was a child, has been pretty obvious, I thought I'd apply at IKEA. Sorry. So once I applied with IKEA, well, before I applied at IKEA, I worked at a different furniture store. It was a smaller boutique, but it was going bankrupt and closing all of its Canadian branches. So I decided to apply at IKEA, and I was just looking for another part-time job to work in between school. I received the job a day after my interview, and I was absolutely ecstatic about working for IKEA. Not only did I get to work in the store where many of my childhood memories were made, but I also had a chance to fully immerse myself in the IKEA way of life, which I've grown up knowing that it's such a positive and interesting environment to be in. So I was completely enthusiastic about doing all the lessons on the computer, filling in all the workbooks, going to training sessions, and of course getting to eat meatballs every day. Love the meatballs still, even if they might have horse meat, but let's not get into that. Anyway, so even though I'm a student at UBC and I'm studying international relations, once I got a job at IKEA, I've always kind of considered, incorporating IKEA into my career potentially. So I'd look at jobs on our IKEA database, and I would find fantastic jobs that would completely relate to my degree. Working in Sweden, working in Europe, working on a global basis. So I really had my heart set on working for IKEA in the long term, even if I was going to school and working part-time right now. Along with all the fantastic experiences I had at the beginning of my career at IKEA, I've also got to meet many wonderful people that I work with, that we're standing out with on a picket line every day. And my cousin was truly right. IKEA is a wonderful place to work. After the initial honeymoon, I was fully integrated into the work environment, and I began to notice little flaws here and there. Obviously with retail, I've worked in retail for about 6 or 7 years since I was 16, so kind of sick of customer service jobs, but IKEA, I really had my heart set on IKEA. But the flaws were kind of unusual for, I guess, a typical retail environment that I had experienced. Why are sales goals so unrealistically high? Why don't we ever meet these goals? Why are we constantly pushed to sell when there's no one to sell to? Why do I get in trouble when I'm doing crucial tasks instead of hounding and following customers every minute of my shift? We're not on commission. Why do we go through management so often? I have not gone through management. In the 3 years I've been there, I've not had so many managers in one workplace as I have with IKEA. Why do I have such a painfully difficult time asking for a single day off if I can't switch it? And I know this applies to many of my coworkers as well. Why am I questioned so heavily about my condition when I call in sick, something I rarely do? Why are us sales coworkers being taught to manage deliveries and other tasks as well? Why are we expected to do so much more than what we're doing already? Why do I feel like I need to pull my hair out and have a few drinks after each weekend shift? This could go on. Sorry if I'm very informal, but this is a different perspective from a part-time coworker. So I don't really have as much experience as knowledge as many of my fellow coworkers, but I'm just trying to give my perspective. Anyways, the environment became a little bit more frustrating, not nearly as enjoyable as I originally perceived it to be, with all this constant pressure. I began to question all of these techniques that were being integrated into our work life. It's like Mark has mentioned, we have become machines to sell. The care wasn't really there, and it wasn't what I imagined it to be originally, especially from the upper level to us coworkers. Since I've only worked for the company for 3 years, I wasn't really familiar with the previous management of the store, but the grumbling from my fellow senior coworkers proved that this isn't how IKEA has normally functioned in the past. Then came the talks of the labor dispute and the new contract. This was my first job where I was a part of a union, so it was all new to me, but it was still extremely intriguing and thought it was something I could learn a lot from. A coworker and I got called to the back office to speak with our manager about the new contract being offered, who was sitting in a room with a small group of coworkers from other departments. Majority of us in the group were newer coworkers like myself, so none of us really had questions at the end to hammer the management with. But rather, we sat in silence as the manager looked confident with the offer she was handing us. The feeling in the room was actually really awkward, as we all knew the contract was a huge farce. So what does this mean for people such as myself? Well, even though I'm simply a part-time coworker who even considered staying with the company long-term, I was perfectly happy with the old contract, just like everyone else. When I first started working at IKEA, I was ecstatic about finally finding a solid, secure, part-time job in which I could advance easily in, which could help pay my bills through a company I really looked up to. Because I was working at IKEA part-time while being a full-time student, I wasn't really, as affected as some of my fellow coworkers were. I'm still lucky to receive medical and dental from UBC, but that's about it. Part-time or full-time, there's still a huge problem here that's affecting every one of us in one way or another. I may still have my medical, but I could barely pay my bills each month while trekking out on transit to Richmond every single weekend. My hours were fairly decent at the beginning of my IKEA career, since I started at the old store, so I was pretty lucky to be one of the only few coworkers that were hired then, up until the build-up and the new store. So up until the lockout, my hours were on a downward slope, as were many of my coworkers' hours, which I was receiving about 4 to 12 hours a week on average. And since I'm such a, lower level junior employee, that meant about $50 to $140 a week. New employees were consistently being hired in my department after the new store opened, which meant a further dispersal of hours, which generally meant me racking up a whopping 10 hours a week on average, if I'm lucky. At that point, I was wondering if coming out to Richmond was even worth it anymore, when I could have found a minimum wage job elsewhere with a lot more hours, at least on weekends. No matter how much I tried, it would still be difficult for myself to pick up extra hours, as everyone else was attempting to do the same to fill their schedules up. Calculating my average pay, I had about an average of $100 a week, which totals up to $400 a month. Now, everyone who has grown up or lives in Vancouver knows this is just completely ridiculous. My rent costs $400 a month, and I don't even live in Vancouver. Besides for rent, I have no money to pay for food, transportation, or tuition, let alone fancy stuff like going out to one movie every few months. So, like a massive amount of Vancouverites knows, it means we're dead stuck living below the poverty line. has been calculated, like just mentioned, that the living wage in Vancouver is $19.62. Of course, this completely varies as we have to take into account the location, the living situation, groceries, and all that. But Vancouver is the second most unaffordable city on earth, first being Hong Kong. So I can see $19 an hour being extremely realistic. And though many of us have been aware of this reality for quite some time, scraping by with my minimum wage student jobs, I thought it would be different with IKEA. Looking at the agreements I signed when I accepted a position with the company, a small, albeit significant raise every year, getting top rate just after 4 or 5 years, I thought I really scored it big time, being able to have a part-time job while studying full-time without much worries. Well, with this new contract, my job with IKEA will be just like any other job in any other retail store, but with the added politics and the negativity in that big blue box that all of us out on the picket line actually had a pleasure of experiencing already, all the negativity coming from the inside out onto our line. My situation might not be nearly as dire as many of my fellow coworkers' situations, but regardless, this entire labor dispute and what IKEA is trying to pin on us affects each and every single one of us, even in the tiniest ways. The company I have grown up to love and admire has become one big corporate machine, at least in North America, and it's just kind of upsetting to see that the original Swedish values that we have all looked up to and regarded in such a positive way are just going down the drain on this side of the planet. Regardless, all of us are fighting not only for the little details that apply to each and every one of us, but also as a whole to beat the corporate greed that has taken over what was once a humble and democratic company. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. I think you touched on so many different topics.
Yeah, I kind of told my life story. I'm really sorry about that.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Because, you know, you did so well in sort of explaining the details of each of those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
In retail, you know, often it's not just about work, it's not just about wages, it's also about hours, especially for part-time workers.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm just, I think that was really impacting. Because often we hear that in the media especially, and publicly, that union members are just about wages. But you seem to portray the perspective that you're quite happy with kind of the contract as is, and you know that was the approach of a lot of folks going into bargaining.
Exactly. We don't want anything more. We just want to keep our old contract. It was fine the way it was.
You mentioned this was your first experience of a union bargaining round, a union action. Can you tell us a bit about why you're still here, why you've got up and spoken today, what it means to be on the picket line for you personally?
Well, for one perspective, being from Vancouver, I think it's important to have a fair and just wage, especially living in the city. I feel like many people who grew up here can't afford to live here anymore, and they have to leave and go elsewhere. And this was where I was born and raised, so I'd like to stay here, and I'd like to, afford a place to live here and afford my school. And I know many people are in the same boat as me. So I think a union job is pretty much one of the main ways to actually keep the wages up and to, have a hold on a livable wage in Vancouver, because there isn't really any other way. Vancouver doesn't have as many industries as, say, Alberta or many head offices such as Ontario. So I think a union job in Vancouver is really, unions in Vancouver in general are really crucial for people who want to make a living here. And I think unions are important to keep control of all the corporate greed that's going on in North America nowadays. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. The next speaker is also an employee of IKEA, Marcus Hubel. The podium is yours.
took a little bit longer than I thought. My name is Marcus Hubel. I've been employed for IKEA for 20 months, 6 of those standing on the line, so 14 months I've been an IKEA employee. I'm just going to take you to a little story, a little bit of a story. See if I can read my phone. Okay. I'll quickly tell you a little story about how I got where I am today. I've worked part-time for 6 years as a care aide for people with disabilities. Good job, but I was looking to do something different. I wanted to change. I've been a resident of Richmond my whole life. I used to be a regular shopper at IKEA. I'm sure some of the long-term employees even watched me in the ball pit. I grew up believing IKEA was a good place to work, always remembering family and friends saying they treat workers very well. Great management team, friendly environment, good pay, good benefits. I would hear of employees who've made their jobs a career and have been employed with IKEA for years. Every day, twice a day, I was driving over the 9th Street Bridge to go to and from work. Over a long period of time, I noticed a giant building that was starting to be built. It even had its very own highway entrance. They still haven't figured out how to use that highway entrance they have. I thought to myself, they're building a brand new IKEA, and they're definitely going to be hiring soon. I had applied a couple times in the past years, but no luck. I even signed up and I sold Christmas trees. Every Christmas when they had Christmas trees. Still, no luck. I finally applied the last time at the new store. It was almost completed and I got the job. I was excited, looking at this as a career, not just as a job. When walking down the halls and seeing the pictures of the longevity of IKEA workers still working here, I wanted to be part of that. Job security is hard to find out there in this crazy world. And here I thought I got it. I was getting married soon, and I was willing to work 2 jobs for the next little while, and hopefully work to be full-time employee at IKEA. I wanted to help build a future for my wife, myself, and my family, and I wish to have soon. So I was getting shifts I'm willing to work towards getting to top rate with good benefits in a full-time position. I would have had to work for 4 years to get top rate with the old contract. But now with this new contract that IKEA is trying to impose, it'll take me over a decade to reach top rate. Like a decade, that's impossible. Like, why would I stay there? It's unrealistic. I just recently got married in April, enjoyed a great honeymoon, and everything in life was going good. Until I showed up to work, mid-May we were locked out. So here I am, out on the streets, standing outside a store that I thought so highly of, and that I had fought so hard to get into. Now I have a new passion, to stand out here with my brothers and sisters at IKEA and realize the mistakes, that IKEA realizes their mistakes, that we have great workers, and great workers are hard to find. Thank you.
Adam, do you have any questions for Michael? Workers, sorry.
Thanks, okay.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, I mean, you've been there 14 months, so can you tell us a bit about how you developed so quickly a sense of solidarity that you just expressed with your co-workers, and how that manifests itself now that you've been on the picket line?
Well, like I said, when I first got hired, I saw a lot of people that have been at a company that's trained very good people for so many years, and watching them struggle for ends meet for their families, it just shows me the solidarity. And my dad, he worked for Rogers that turned into Shaw at the time, and they put him in the early 90s on the line for 9 months to try to break their union. And I asked him, I said, is it worth it to stand on the line? And he said, you know what, I did it for the future of other coworkers. I never did it just for whoever. So for me, I'm a part-time employee right now, but I believe the same he did, and I believe in unions, and I think right now that, you know, we need solidarity. It's a hard world out there.
Just to kind of build on your comments there, would you say that this experience has maybe brought you and your coworkers together?
Oh, for sure. I only knew cash employees when I first started. Now I know pretty much a lot of the departments of, spending hours in the night. It's cold out there. We just have a tent and a little heater, so either we talk to each other, talk about Candy Crush scores. I don't know. A lot of things to do up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have one more IKEA employee who will speak and give the testimony, and it's Koros Shokrosade. Podium is yours.
Hello. First of all, I want to tell you thank you very much for coming here. We really appreciate your input about everything, and we hope you can take the message to Sweden so they know what's going on here. Because I lived in Sweden for about 12 years before I moved to Vancouver. I am a 3 years IKEA employee. And the way that the Sweden run is not the way the IKEA run here. The way that was, I presume the IKEA in Sweden was, when I came to the company starting, they told me about the IKEA culture, that I was so much could related to the Swedish culture. And the Swedish culture is one of the greatest in the world. And actually, they are very fair. They are to think about the people who's living there should have a good life. Working is a privilege in Sweden. When you are working, you are honored. Doesn't matter what you do. As you take out the garbage, or you are the professor in university. Doesn't matter. You are a worker, and the worker is much respected. And what I thought when I started here, going to be the same thing. I come to the Swedish culture and expected to receive the same thing. But unfortunately, I see so much in contradiction about that. What they are preaching, they are not what they are doing. And that's what something that kind of very much disappointing for me. I don't have any notes, I don't have anything, just speaking from my heart. So just forgive me. Anyway, the only thing is, I just, as one of those 300 fellow co-workers who's working at IKEA right now, standing here, I'm not representing them, I'm just one of them. And in this respect, I'm going to tell you that how much going to affect my family during this 6 months dispute has been there. I have to find another part-time job to be able to basically support my family, because it's a very important part. And that's something that I think is not connected between the company and the human side of the company. Basically, those who's working there is not just a number and profit. Those are people who have their life. They have kids, they have a family, they have something to do. For example, if you give somebody 10 hours a week as a part-timer, how you can expect you're going to stay there for a long time? How can you build a career based on that one? So I work as a part-timer too, but I was fortunate to pick up the hours in the different department. They call me for a hours hunter, because I try to just make as much as possible, come to about 30, 40 hours a week. I was fortunate that I come to the return department about 1 year ago, and they offered me 30 hours guarantee position, and that was very good. But the thing is, still I'm looking for another 10 hours to make it to 40 hours, because that was important for my income. And what I personally go through with the kid has my older son, younger son has autism. So basically has a lot of 24 hours attention. He's a good kid, he's actually working right now, and he actually kind of contribute to the society too. But the thing is, he has a kind of 20 hours supervision. He calling us 10 times a day from her cell phone to say us, oh, I'm out there, it's rainy. Is that okay, it's rainy? So this kind of situation he is. But I'm very proud of him, because he did a great job. My wife through the breast cancer situation last year, and it was very difficult for me. And I see so much support from my co-workers over there. They are so nice, and everybody, even I didn't knew them, they come to me and give me a hug and tell me, what's your wife doing? And this kind of things give you a kind of sense of belonging. You're belonging to the place that you want to grow up, basically. But unfortunately, the situation is right now, I don't see any kind of the light in the end of the tunnel. Mark could actually talk better than every of us and put everything in a right perspective, and the thing that he materialized what we are going to say and what we are thinking. And the only thing is, as I said, the IKEA culture is not that way expecting. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Koros?
Sure. If I know that you made the distinction, you wanted to speak for yourself and not for everyone else, but you know, if we were to, you know, if someone from IKEA were in the room today, how would you address them regarding this situation, and from speaking from your heart and from your experience?
Yes. What is happening, even I was inside the store, as Mark put it in best way actually, regarding the disconnection between the management, top management, and the co-workers over there. What I said, you have to make your act right to expecting us to make us right. Because I've been there for 3 years, and during these 3 years, how many management in a high level came and go, never has a time to build the store. That's what I told them all the time. I'm working in a return department. I see all kinds of flaws every day. And what they come, it's kind of funny for me, when they come to the last offer, they said, the store is not underperforming, and we want the store to make a better performance. Based on performance, we're going to pay you on your wages increase. But I said, it's something that is not under my control. How do you expect me to say yes to this one? Because I know every day that the product is not has the quality that has supposed to has, because we see a lot of stuff. We have a problem with our full serve department that is very small. We don't have enough space to put the stuff in there, so they have to build another part again to make it bigger to be able to do that. We see so much customers sitting there for 2 hours, get distraught, and after 2 hours say, sorry, we don't have that, it's oversold. How can I control that? That's something that I'm not expecting that they want me to do. That's the management job. If it's something wrong with the store management, they should go to the higher level and fix the thing. But as long as we do our job, we're expecting that what they respect us for what we are doing. Okay. Thank you very much.
Now I'm turning to Lindsay, the lawyer here. We have heard a number of speakers here today, and can you put what we have heard into a context of labor law and the recent labor history in BC?
Well, I'll try to do that, Peter. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Commission. I'd also like to thank the BC Federation of Labour very much for inviting me to be present here today and to participate. I have listened with great interest to the stories that we've heard, especially the stories that we've heard from you, the workers at IKEA, who have been locked out these 6 long months. For those of us who aren't from British Columbia, it may be a little bit hard to understand some of the political structure here in this province. We have something that is pleased to call itself a Liberal government in BC. That's a capital L Liberal government that would bear no resemblance to anything that someone in Sweden or Britain might think of as a small L Liberal government. We've had that government for quite a long time now, and boy, the timing of your lockout is interesting, isn't it? It was just at the same time as we had a provincial election here in British Columbia, when I'm sure many people in this room were quite hopeful that we were going to have a different government than what we have today. That said, I agree with what Jim Sinclair from the BC Federation of Labour had to say, that what we've heard about today, what you've experienced firsthand within your relationship with your employer is, I think, a lot more to do with IKEA than it is to do with provincial politics here in the province of BC. We have a labor relations code which in some respects, one important respect which your union has used to significant advantage in your labor dispute, it does provide workers with some significant labor rights. And what I'm referring to there is the replacement worker provision that Jim Sinclair referred to. So what IKEA has done in this dispute is push the envelope, and in fact, in some respects, torn up the envelope of conventional, lawful labor relations under the British Columbia Labor Relations Code. What they've done is, and the Labor Relations Board of BC has found this to be the case, is they have on a number of occasions quite systematically brought in replacement workers contrary to the provisions of the Labor Relations Code. In the most significant decision from the board on that point, the board found that the breaches of the replacement worker provisions of the code are far-reaching, extending to virtually all corners of the work site. And because of that, what the Labor Board in that decision did was they said, we're going to appoint an industrial relations officer, a civil servant, whose job it is going to be to go in and see what is going on behind the barricades, behind the doors which are closed to you folks as workers who are locked out, and to see what's going on. And that was because, as the board said, of the expansive and far-reaching breaches of the unfair labor practice provisions of the Labor Relations Code. Now, unfortunately, the board, on reconsideration of that decision, an appeal of that decision, upheld the unfair labor practices which the board had found had been occurred by bringing in these replacement workers, but overturned the board's decision in terms of bringing in that industrial relations officer to investigate what was going on. I think that's really unfortunate, because your union, the Teamsters, has done yeoman's service in trying to figure out what's going on behind those doors that are closed to you, in bringing in a private detective to take videotape so that they could prove what was going on with replacement workers in the workplace. Those replacement workers have included your fellow employees who have crossed the picket line, sadly. Who were hired subsequent to the notice to bargain being given. They have included security workers. They have included managers brought in from out of province. They have included cleaning contractors being brought in to work longer hours than they worked prior to the lockout. In all of those ways, the board has found that your employer has breached the Labor Relations Code and has committed an unfair labor practice. And there's other ways, I think, on what I've heard today, that your employer has sadly been really pushing the envelope of lawful conduct under our Labor Relations Code. I've been particularly struck by what we lawyers like to call captive audience meetings. What I'm talking about there are the stories that several of you have told, where managers have brought you in, either in small groups or one-on-one sessions, to sell you on the collective agreement that your employer has sought to impose upon you. Now, sadly, under our Labor Relations Code, that may well be lawful. But boy, it's pushing the envelope of lawful behavior. Similarly, when Anita Dawson, your business representative, spoke about some of the provisions which the employer has sought to have the union agree to, and which of course the union hasn't agreed to, I was struck by how she talked about how much more difficult it has become for the union to obtain access to the workplace, even for casual conversation, just to check in. And I was particularly struck by the collective agreement provision which the employer sought to have the union agree to. Very glad to hear that they've now backed off of it, whereby a worker could not at one and the same time be both a shop steward and a supervisor. Our Labor Relations Code prohibits employers from an employer or a person acting on behalf of an employer must not participate in or interfere with the formation, selection, or administration of a trade union, or contribute financial or other support to it. What else did we hear about today? We heard about the employer offering to pay the legal expenses, I think I heard, of those employees who would cross the picket line and who would then face charges under your union constitution. My word, that is playing very, very close to the line of Section 6 of the Labor Relations Code. So, those are just some of the things that I've heard this afternoon. Some of them I knew about before because they're a matter of record and a decision of the BC Labor Relations Board in terms of the breaches, the systemic breaches, the far-reaching breaches of the replacement worker provisions of the code. For some things I've learned about today for the first time having to do with what is coming very close to, I would say, interference in the administration of your trade union. Very concerning, but I want to commend all of those of you who are here today and all of those who have been sitting on that picket line, walking on that picket line. Oh, just one more point. You might be interested to know that your employer, in seeking to justify its use of the replacement workers, said that not only had they not locked you out, there was no strike. And so therefore, there was no Section 68 of the Labor Relations Code, which is the provision that prohibits the use of replacement workers, didn't even apply. You may be surprised to know that your employer actually argued before the Labor Relations Board, no strike, no lockout. Fortunately, the Labor Relations Board had very little difficulty in saying, boy, walks like a duck and talks like a duck. I think there's a labor dispute going on here. I think the replacement worker provisions of the code apply. But I commend you with the solidarity that you've shown. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Do you have any questions for Lindsay? Okay. Actually, we only have one point left on the agenda. That's the closing comments. And we have decided, well, I have decided, since my mind is not in a good shape today. Today I mixed up the countries, the cities, the names. So I have decided that the closing comments will be done by Michael and Erin, and we'll start with Michael.
Thanks very much. I also want to start actually by thanking all of you for coming today and for taking part, and especially those who got up and shared their testimony. That was very, very informative. It was. It's obviously going to shape this report that we will ultimately do, and it's definitely going to have an impact somewhere along the line of. I think someone used the metaphor the other day. We drop a rock in a puddle and there's ripples, and so sometimes we don't know where these, how many of these ripples they're going to be and how long it's going to be. But this is one of those ripples, and you're all part of it. So I just wanted to basically summarize where we've been as delegates here over the last couple of days, who we've spoken with, and things like that. Yesterday morning we met with the Teamsters Local 213 at their office. We met with a number of officers, the business agent, and as well as the bargaining committee, which was absolutely an outstanding opportunity for us to get to the details of what's on the table. Sometimes things become convoluted in bargaining, and I would say in my experience, all the time things become convoluted in the bargaining process. And it was very important to draw out what are these key issues, and so to have that opportunity to hear from the technical end what's on the table and what are the real key issues was really important for the commission, as well as the legal details and the legal things that have gone on, which Lindsay just so eloquently elaborated for us. From there we went to the picket line, and I would like to say that from my perspective was one of the most enlightening components of this. It was when we got to speak to the actual people on the picket line and get on the ground, was where I think we started to connect with what this dispute actually means for people and for their families and for their lives. One story that really sticks out was, there's people on that picket line that, have young children that, are ill, suffering from illness, And you know, this sort of, the impact is actually immeasurable when you talk about not being allowed to work. I mean, the company has said that sure, you can come back to work, but under a substandard arrangement, something that is kind of outside the idea of collective bargaining. If you're saying, you know, yeah, well, you're locked out, but you can come back to work if you want, but under these substandard conditions, right? But the main point was that there are people who are suffering out there, but I didn't, and this has been a 6-month long, almost 6-month long dispute, but I really didn't get a sense that people were in any way negative about it, you know. They weren't, there wasn't what you would kind of expect from that kind of situation. People were sticking together. People saw the reasons. People understood why they were doing what they were doing. And every single person that we spoke to was absolutely knowledgeable about the issues and about how this dispute and these issues have impacted them. And it wasn't just, you know, impacting workers now, and I think that's where it brings this whole issue into a broader context. We're also talking about the future of commercial and retail industry in Canada and in the world. These are ongoing sort of trends, and we've seen it in the non-union retail sector in Walmart and things, just this race to the bottom. And I think that what's going on here in Richmond is another one of those many examples of what's standing in the way of things getting really, really bad for working people. And so I think what's going on out there is incredibly important, and I was really touched and moved to be able to speak to people who are actually living it. Today, we heard from a broad range of views as well, and obviously this is going to be very important. My understanding is that it's all recorded, so while we were taking diligent notes, I know we didn't catch everything, but we will be reviewing all that stuff, rest assured. But I just wanted to end, and before passing it over to Aaron, and just make the statement that, you know, some people might be wondering, well, what is the point of this? What is the job of the commission? And really what it is, it's very basic, it's very simple. It's to open those spaces where we can engage the stakeholders, and yes, we invited the employer to meet with us, and yes, they said they did not want to meet with us prior to coming here. But I think most importantly is to open the spaces for those voices to come out, and for that stuff, for those voices to be heard in a broader context. And that's basically, to put a fine point on it, I think that's the point. Thanks.
Yeah, it's been a very informative 2 days, passionate at times, emotional, but also we've got to learn a lot about what's going on here in Richmond and with IKEA. I get a sense from the older employees, not older in age, older in tenure, that they're feeling a real sense of loss at the moment with this company that they once treasured, held quite close to their hearts, and I'm feeling from them a kind of sense of betrayal almost. For the new employees, I'm feeling much more of a frustrated expectation that's not been met by something they walked into thinking was one thing and actually has turned out to be something very different. Our job as a commission is to ask the questions, are IKEA being serious? Are their claims plausible around this dispute? What does this mean, this particular dispute mean for industrial relations here in BC, but not just in BC, across the globe? I find it very difficult to talk about my job and attach it to tangible things, but at moments of crisis like this, it all becomes very clear what my job and what my role should be at the international level. If the union here is broken, it will send out a signal both here and to the rest of the world, including throughout the IKEA network of stores. it will give another indication to the big global companies that they can trample on workers' rights, that they can dilute their commitments to social dialogue with worker representatives, and thereby further squeeze the living standards and benefits of ordinary working people. The determination, the courage, the sacrifice of many of the workers we have heard from today, and we met on the picket line yesterday, is a real inspiration to us all. And to workers everywhere who are struggling against selfish corporate interests. Our task now is to examine this evidence further, to write our report, to take our findings back to the international labour movement, back to Sweden. But we hope IKEA will change course. We hope it will go back to the negotiation table with the workforce with no preconditions. We hope it does this in good faith and in line with the IKEA values that were outlined so passionately by Mark earlier today. That was really powerful. The materials IKEA puts out on its philosophy and culture, it's explicit about the rights of workers to organise. Implicit in this right is to acknowledge that workers will sometimes have a different perspective and different ideas. These differences need to be managed in dialogue. The term co-worker must have meaning. Alternatively, the dispute goes on, under the gaze now of a wider international labour movement, which is looking very closely at this dispute. The labour movement has affiliates and workers in different IKEA stores and throughout its supply chain, many of whom I'm sure would be proud to stand up in solidarity with those courageous men and women we met on the picket line today and heard from today too, to get this message out to a wider audience. So thank you today for your participation. I hope in some small way that this international focus on this dispute will haste a resolution, and a resolution that satisfies those, particularly those we've heard from today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael and Erin. I just want to finish up with saying I really would like to emphasize we take this really seriously. We will make a serious report, and we will communicate the report to both ITF and to the Global Union, and we'll take it from there. And if you cannot resolve the problem here in Richmond by yourself or nationally, I'm sure we will be there for you in one way or another. I also would like to thank all the speakers here today and all the other participants who have taken your time to come here to listen to this public hearing. And hopefully we'll have an end of this lockout before Christmas. Hopefully as soon as possible, but before Christmas. Thank you so very much for all of you here.